Happy New Year, everyone, and welcome to SCORE Fairfield County's live webinar on how to position your business for growth and profitability in 2021. I'm Bob Hogan, the webinar coordinator today and the business mentor here at SCORE Fairfield County, and I'm going to be your host. Our presenter is Cliff Ennico. More on Cliff in just a minute, but first some brief information on SCORE. SCORE is a nonprofit national partner of the SBA. Cliff, if I could ask you to move the slide, please. Locally here in SCORE Fairfield County, we have over 130 volunteers with a wide range of industry, process, and subject matter expertise. And we offer three primary value-added services to small business owners. First of all, we offer free one-on-one counseling, and you can have that by face-to-face, which is via video in these times, by telephone or by email. And you can do that by either clicking on the link that you see here on the screen in yellow, or you can visit our website and click on the Request a Mentor link. Secondly, we offer a wide range of educational webinars, about 150 throughout the year. And we also offer extensive resources on our website, including access to subject matter experts. Our next live webinar will be Thursday, January 7th at noon. And the topic is, I'm a technology expert, ask me anything, with Matt Krieger presenting. And you can find more specifics on that on our website, fairfieldcounty.score.org. And when you're on our website, you'll also be able to find a large number of on-demand webinars on a wide range of topics that you can access at any time at your leisure. Just some brief comments about today's webinar. We have set aside time for Q&A at the end of the presentation. And if you have a question, please use the chat window by hovering on the lower part of your screen and just clicking chat, and you can put your question in there at any time and Cliff will answer it once he's done his prepared remarks. We will end our webinar today sharply at 1 o'clock to respect your time. The session is being recorded and a link to the recording will be available at our website, fairfieldcounty.score.org, within the next couple of days. And you may actually want to access that recording because Cliff has some very detailed information that you may want to revisit again. It's now my pleasure to introduce our speaker, Cliff Ennico. Cliff is a nationally recognized small business, legal, and tax expert, and he's best known as former host of Money Hunt on PBS, where entrepreneurs defended their business plans before America's toughest panel of experts. An attorney and a small business consultant here in Fairfield, Connecticut, he has helped launch over 15,000 businesses. He is the author of 16 books, the most recent one being the Crowdfunding Handbook, How to Raise Capital for Your Business Using Equity Funding Portals. Cliff, it's all yours. You have to unmute yourself first. There you go.
All righty, there we go. It's funny, after doing so many of these, I still have to remember to unmute myself. I'm just the sort of person who cannot unmute himself. I am one of those people. So first of all, before we get started with our today's program, there are two things I want to say. Number one is Happy New Year. Bob already wished you all a Happy New Year. But the more important thing that I want to say to all of you who are on this program is congratulations. The fact that you are listening to this program now means you have survived probably the worst year for American small business since the Great Depression of the 1930s. 2020 was an absolutely miserable, awful, no good year. And I think we're all happy to see it in our rearview mirrors. Like always, we have a couple of disclaimers that we do whenever we do these programs. The most important one is the first one. While we will be getting into some legal and tax stuff on this program, there's a very big difference between giving out legal information and giving out legal advice. There's a very big difference between saying this is what the law is generally all about, which is what we're going to be talking about a little bit later. And here's what you should do, John and Mary. Here's why you should do something different. That's advice. I cannot give that on any of the programs that I do for SCORE. That's advice that can only be given by a lawyer, accountant, or tax advisor in your home jurisdiction, wherever you may be. There's another disclaimer I want to make too, and this is not on the slide right now, which is I'm going to be making some predictions about the future. The this program is really talking about 2021 and what is probably going to be in store for small businesses and their owners. But my crystal ball is really no better than anyone else. I mean, all I know is what I see in the papers and the media, and the 40 years that I've been working with small businesses. I can maybe give a little bit more analysis than some people, but my crystal ball may not be any much better than anything else that you may be reading. I will certainly offer you my opinions, but I will also make sure that they're clearly labeled as such. That's all that they are. So during the first half of the pandemic last year, whenever somebody called me I hadn't spoken to in a while, my question was, "Oh, what's new? What's new in your life? What's going on?" It was my little joke there, probably not a very funny one. But 2020, as I said, was a miserable, awful, no good year. So what about 2021 now? We're a few days into it already. First of all, some good news. I don't think we're going to be seeing any lockdowns in the United States this year, at least not in the northeastern United States, which is where I'm located. Some other parts of the country may be a little bit different, but I think we're kind of past the lockdown stage. I think most of the political powers that be realize that they can't really do any more significant lockdowns without seriously and permanently damaging the U.S. economy. I think that message has soaked in at this point. So we're only going to seeing lockdowns when they are desperately necessary because of various spikes in the infection rates. But we are nowhere near out of the woods. 2021, I believe, is going to be a transitional year to the new normal. We'll talk about that in a little bit. In a lot of ways, I don't think we're going to be seeing a widespread return to normalcy, however you define normal, until 2022. Now, I may be overly pessimistic there, but that's my prediction for 2021. This is a transition year. The good news is we have a vaccine. We have several vaccines, actually. They just announced one in the UK too, which will probably be available here shortly. But the rollout is going to take months. It's not going to happen this week or next week or the week after. Right now, the rollout is in what they call phase 1A, which is hospital and healthcare workers and people in nursing homes. That is what the CDC has recommended nationally. Some states may be doing it more aggressively than others, but it's going to take months before the general population is inoculated. And keep in mind that the two vaccines that are most popular right now require booster shots 3 to 4 weeks after you have your initial inoculation. So even if all of us were inoculated tomorrow, we'd still have to wait 3 or 4 years to get the booster shot. So it's going to take a while. I mean, it's going to take the bulk of 2021 for the virus rollout to take place. And it's going to get complicated because the virus, probably the worst news we've had in the last week to 10 days, is that the virus appears to be mutating. Some mutant virus variations of the coronavirus have come up in England and in South Africa, and it is coming to the United States. Colorado, California, and Florida have already reported incidents of the new mutation. At-risk people are going to be cautious for a long time yet. People who are over the age of 65, who have comorbidity issues, it's going to be a while before these people are going to be partying like it's 1999 again. It's going to be a long time, even after everybody is vaccinated. I mean, I'm sure most of you would agree with me. Even after I get vaccinated, I'm still going to be wearing a mask in public for a while. There are some people who think I should do this always, for the rest of my life. But, what can I say? We'll talk about that out in the alley after the program is over. But I'm going to be doing that. I mean, and certain aspects of my behavior are probably going to change permanently. If I am going to board an airplane anytime in the next 5 years, I am going to be wearing a mask. Simple as that. If your business relies heavily on people gathering in large groups, your prizes probably is not going to come back until at least 2022. I'm starting to get brochures now from cruise ship lines and tourist, people that do guided tours in Europe and places like that, and they're all touting their 2022 calendar. right now, which I think tells you something. But here's the thing: even when your business comes back, it's never going to be the same as it was in 2019. I think the pandemic has wrought some permanent changes in the economy, in the marketplace, in the way that customers and people are just looking at the world. Some of it will stick, some of it will not. And that's partly what we're going to be discussing in the next few minutes. So, again, my crystal ball, folks, is no better than anyone else's. So please don't take this as gospel. But here's my personal prediction based on what I'm seeing in my world and the clients that I'm working with. January to June, this is going to be the winter of our discontent. That comes from Shakespeare, Richard III. We're still going to be in pandemic mode for the first couple of quarters of 2021. The lockdown, while we may not be seeing actual lockdowns, the lockdown mentality is still going to be continuing. People are going to be staying at home more, especially people who are at risk for the coronavirus, are probably going to be taking a very cautious view of things until the vaccination level reaches a certain saturation level. The vaccine is not likely to reach the general public during this phase. We're still going to be in what they call 1A, which is hospital, healthcare workers, and people in nursing homes. Then it's going to start opening up. July to September, we're going to be seeing a difference here. Warmer temperatures will lead to a replay of summer of last year. Restaurants will be able to do more outdoor dining. You're going to be seeing, a lot more outdoor activity, people, going to parks and things like that, like we did last year, pretty much the same. But the vaccines will start I don't know. One of the curious things about the pandemic, a lot of people I know are actually rooting for global warming right now. It's so interesting, especially here in the Northeast. People are sort of saying, hey, we got balmy temperatures. It's 50 degrees in January. No problem. Very interesting what a pandemic does to your view on the environment. But more importantly, during this phase, during what I call the third quarter of this year, vaccines will start reaching the at-risk general public, people over 65. Doctors' offices will start getting these now, or at least they will know where they are, so that they can start advising their patients. Teachers will be getting them. This is what they call the 1B rollout for those people. 1A is hospital and healthcare workers and people in nursing homes. 1B is people over 65, 70, other medical professionals, teachers, and, first responders and those kind of people. Fourth quarter is when we're going to start seeing some developments here. My prediction is that schools will reopen. One of the lessons we've learned from the pandemic is that virtual learning does not work as well as classroom learning, especially for children in the early grades. And I think there's a growing consensus that we've got to get at least the elementary schools and the middle schools back functioning the way they did by fall of this year. I think there's going to be an overwhelming pressure on government to reopen the schools. Now, that's a mixed blessing, of course, because even though the kids themselves are not really vulnerable to the virus, people that they come in contact with are. I mean, a kid goes to kindergarten, he's probably not going to catch the virus from his other friends, and if he does, he'll probably survive it with a minimum of fuss and bother. But the minute he goes home and kisses grandma, it's all over. Okay, so there's that. When schools get open, there's going to have to be some conversation about school children having contact with people who are more at risk than they are. Also, too, I think we're going to start seeing herd immunity. By that point, so many people in the United States will have had the virus that there will be a natural immunity, especially for people who are in the lower risk categories. I think we will see vaccines starting to reach the general public. I think the 1B program will pretty much be rolled out at that point. We might even be moving on to the 1C program, which is everybody over 65 and other people who are deemed by their doctors to be at risk for one reason or another. But I do not think we are going to see super spreader events encouraged. during any time during 2021. Large gatherings of people, I think, are pretty much going to be prohibited throughout the year. And even if they're not, I think a lot of people are voluntarily going to opt out of attending these events because they are concerned about their health. A lot of people are simply going to self-select themselves out of that. Now, those are my predictions. Now, there are some flies in the ointment that could change this. The new coronavirus mutant, I understand it's in Florida now as well as Colorado and California. That's the version that from the UK. There's also another mutation from South Africa, which I don't think has hit the US as yet. Right now, the vaccine people are all saying not to worry. The vaccines that are already on the market are powerful enough that they should be able to prevent you from getting any of these mutating variants, but that may change over time. We have to see what happens with that. Also, we have to keep an eye on the vaccine supply. The two vaccines that are most common in the US right now require booster shots 3 to 4 weeks after you have your initial inoculation. Otherwise, it's not as effective. So we have to keep in mind that when vaccines roll out, we have to get the booster shot before we can start, wiping our brows and saying, okay, I think we're past that now. I think we can take more risks. There are two schools of thought on what's going to happen with the economy later this year. And again, I think we're talking here about the second half of the year primarily, not the first half. The first half, we're still going to be in pandemic mode. Two schools of thought. I mean, there's some people that I've talked to who are telling me that people are going to have so much pent-up demand that business activity will return to normal quickly once the combination of vaccinations and herd immunity reaches a tipping point. And nobody knows what that tipping point is. These are the optimists who are predicting a V-shaped recovery. There's a second school of thought, though, among people I know that people, especially people with higher risk of getting COVID or higher risk of dying if they get it, will continue to be cautious for another year or two until the level of new infections goes below a tipping point. And again, no one knows what this tipping point is. I won't even attempt to define it. These are the people who are predicting a U-shaped recovery. I'm noticing a difference of opinion here. And it seems to me, and this is not at all scientific or based on statistics in any way, but it seems to me that which school you follow depends a lot on who you are. If you are a younger person, you're young, you're in your 20s, you're single, you can't wait to get back on Tinder again and start hanging out at the bar with your friends, you tend to be more in the first group. If you tend to be older, especially if you have some health issues that you're dealing with, some chronic issues, or you're over 65, or you're overweight, or you got diabetes or whatever, you tend to be more in the more pessimistic group, what I'm calling the wait and see group of people. I have no idea how it's going to play out, although as always, I'm somewhat in the middle. People ask me, so Cliff, where do you stand? Are you a wait and see person, or are you a let's go get them person? The answer is I'm kind of in the middle, as I always tend to be. I think there are some things going on that will go away after the vaccinations and the herd immunity reaches a certain tipping point. I think that the optimists are partly correct. That some things, certain habits that we've developed during the pandemic are going to go away, but others will not. Others will be more permanent. So I'm kind of in the middle. And here's just my observation, just based on what I'm hearing from my clients and from the people that I'm dealing with, and frankly, my own predilections. There are certain things that I think are likely to go back to normal more quickly than others. And mostly these are things that require more work. If you have developed a habit during the pandemic that required more work than it did previously, you're probably going to want to go back to the easier way of doing things after the pandemic, after we reach that tipping point, whatever that tipping point is. So for example, if you are cooking more at home, you're probably going to be giving that up at some point. You're going to be, going back to the way you operated in 2019. People ordering more takeout and curbside pickup. I think that's going to fall off a little bit once we hit the tipping point because it's expensive. I mean, I don't know if you've noticed this, but most restaurants that are surviving by, takeout and curbside pickup have not reduced their prices on their entrees. Even though you are picking it up, personally, and they don't have to book space for you in the restaurant. They're still charging a lot for the same for their entrees as they did pre-pandemic, and they do that for a very good reason, because that's what they need to do to survive. And I don't fault them at all for doing that. But there are a lot of people who are going to get tired of that, and they're going to say, if I want $50 for an entree, well, darn it, I want the restaurant experience. I want to sit there and the decor and all that wonderful stuff. So I think that's going to have a shorter shelf life. I could be again, I could be wrong on all of this. Okay. People focusing more on home improvement projects. That certainly has happened during the pandemic, but let's face it, sooner or later you run out of projects to do. Unless, of course, you have a spouse like mine who seems to have an endless supply of ideas for projects that need to be done. But I think a lot of us have people we know who are like that, spouses or significant others. But for most people, I think you're going to run out of projects, and they're going to start, wanting other people to do them again the way they did previously. People working out at home or by themselves. I have to say, I represent several gyms here in Connecticut, and I'm seeing them actually returning. In a way, people still want to exercise with other people in formal classes. We're seeing an increase in popularity now for exercise programs and subscriptions that you can do with other people. You're working out at home, but you're in organized classes with other people who are all working out of their homes with an instructor, all at the same time on a schedule. You're starting to see that people do not want to work out by themselves. They feel more comfortable. Maybe it's a guilt thing. They feel that if there are other people around, the shame factor will force them to do. It's a lot like dieting, by the way. I mean, if you go to a place where they weigh you every week and you're in a class and everybody reports how they're doing, you tend to do better than you do otherwise, because there's less of a chance to cheat, quite frankly. The fact that someone is going to be judging you at some point makes it easier for you to stay on your schedule. And I think that that's going to be something in the workout field is going to be getting back to normal. Online learning. I'm really torn by online learning. I do not have children in school right now, so I'm not really on top of this as I probably should be. But what I'm hearing from a lot of people and from what I'm seeing in the media and elsewhere is that virtual learning, especially in the early grades, is not working as well as people thought it would. Now, it may at higher levels, in the high school and college levels, it may be working better. Students are more mature, they're more disciplined. Of course, teenagers, to the extent that they are mature at all. But that kind of thing, online dating, is something that, again, depending on who you are, virtual may not be the same as actually meeting someone and reading their visual cues and their body language and stuff like that, which is hard to do on a Zoom call. Again, I am not in the market, so I'm really not somebody who should be who's not experiencing this myself. But I have a sneaking suspicion that these are the things that are likely to revert more quickly to pre-pandemic patterns later this year. But having said that, there are some longer term changes, and a lot of these are likely to be permanent. People are going to be more aware of their surroundings. I really believe that. Whenever you are in a public place, you're going to be looking at the people around you and how they are behaving more than you ever did. I mean, years ago, I commuted to New York. You take the train into New York, there were these mobs of people all around you. And one of the ways that you survived that was to sort of block everything out. If you had headphones, you could listen to music, whatever. But even if you didn't, you'd block all these people out. You sort of get into your little zone. And I don't think that that's going to be happening as much anymore. I think people are going to be looking around them and saying, well, hey, but those people over there are not wearing masks. Why is that the case? Why is that going on? I don't want to go near those people. I think there's going to be more of an awareness that the people around you can get you sick. That's number one. Number two, people are going to be doing more with technology. That's going to be a permanent change. I mean, it was happening a lot before the pandemic also. I mean, what the pandemic did was turbocharge a lot of changes that were going on in the economy anyway, is what happened. They're happening. They're still going to happen, but they're going to happen a lot faster because of the pandemic. And this is one of them. People are going to be relying more on technology to do just about everything that they do in lives. and of course that creates a lot of opportunity for entrepreneurs and investors as well. You want to look for the companies. I mean, who even heard of Zoom.us 9 months ago? And now look at us, we're all using it. I mean, there's going to be a lot of that kind of stuff, I think. And we're going to be looking for those solutions, and employers and other people are going to be looking for those solutions even harder than they did pre-pandemic. People are going to be working more remotely and virtually. This is a major sea change. I remember last January, before the pandemic hit, I actually attended a panel in New York. It was the annual meeting of the New York Bar Association, and they had a panel of managing partners at some of the biggest law firms in New York about managing millennials, managing their junior people and whatnot. And one of the questions that came up is, would you consider and working from home, working remote working options for these people so they can manage their work-life balance better? And all 6 of the panelists said no. The law is a collaborative process. These are people who are going through an internship. They need to their apprenticeship. They need to learn their trade. They only can do that in groups and working on projects, on teams with other attorneys, yada yada. Nobody was even willing to consider it. That was January of last year. However, I got to believe if you brought those 6 people into a room today, they'd be singing a much different tune. I think all of us are going to be looking for remote working options. We're now painfully aware how much time we wasted pre-pandemic in meetings, in trains, in buses, in commuting. Back in the 1980s, when I first started practicing in New York, I had a 2+ hour commute into lower Manhattan from Connecticut each day, which I did for about 5 or 6 years before I finally got smart and I moved my practice up here closer to home. But I cannot imagine people doing that now post-pandemic. I just don't think it's going to happen. It's going to have impacts on business travel, commercial office space now. A lot of employers are realizing now they have way too much space now. If most of their employees are going to be working remotely, they don't really need that big office tower in downtown New York or downtown Houston or downtown Chicago. And this is going to change the way we work. I think that's going to be a long-term change. People are going to be leery of large crowds. And I think that's going to be, the super spreader events. Now, some people are saying, Cliff, you're being too pessimistic. The local cops have broken up 3 parties on New Year's, from people who obviously were not afraid of getting together in large crowds. Again, it depends on who you are. If you're a younger person, if the socialization is very important to you, you may be taking a more aggressive, a more optimistic view of this, but there are a lot of people who aren't. But I think it's going to be a while before people are going to be really comfortable being in large crowds. And then last but not least, and this is a little bit more philosophical, but I think people are going to be more aware of how precarious life is. Let's face it, people in the United States have never really experienced adversity before this. Don't get me wrong. We all have our good times and our bad times in life. But a global pandemic where, you could be perfectly healthy one day and on a ventilator the next. We people in the United States have grown up, 3 generations of Americans have grown up believing that sort of stuff can't happen here. Those sorts of things only happen in other parts of the world that don't have all the wonderful things that the United States has. We thought for a while that we were immune from history and from biology. And this pandemic, if it has taught us anything, it has taught us that that's not the case. We have not conquered nature. We have not. Mother Nature still has a lot of surprises for us. And life is a very precious and precarious thing. It could be gone tomorrow. Our ancestors knew this a lot better than we did. When your life expectancy is only 35, you live each day as if, it was your last. We were getting a little complacent here in the United States for a while. And hopefully the pandemic has gotten us out of that. We've broken out of that complacent attitude. And I think we're going to start living a little bit better because of that, because we are aware that it could all be taken away. It will all be taken away from us in a heartbeat. Okay. So now back to earth. Let's talk about, what's happening here. What's the government going to be doing this year that's different in previous years? I apologize. Some of these slides are a little dense. Just so you know, there is an appendix to this program. For those of you who are watching remotely, If you go past the last slide in the program, I've added several slides which go into a lot more detail about what I'm going to be talking about for the next few minutes. But at the end of 2020, we had a major law pass in Congress. It was part of the Consolidated Appropriations Bill for 21, and it was called the Economic Aid. I have to move my camera to read this. Economic Aid to Hard Hit Small Businesses, Nonprofits, and Venues Act. Basically, this is the act that reinstated the Paycheck Protection Program, the PPP program. Back in March of 2020, when the pandemic first hit, Congress inaugurated the first PPP program, which went until August of last year. In December of 2020, Congress reinstated it. They included new appropriations for new loans and grants to be admitted by the SBA, the same organization that sponsors SCORE, including approximately $284 billion for loans and $20 billion for economic injury disaster loans. Now, I'm not going to go into a lot of detail here. For those of you who are interested, you should look at the slides that on my appendix to this program, which go into a lot more detail. But one of the things that it did clarify, even if you got a PPP loan in 2020, you can apply for a second draw PPP loan equal to the lower of $2 million or 2.5 times your average monthly payroll costs for the last 12 months. If you're in the food service or lodging accommodation businesses, the multiplier is 3.5. They do recognize that those industries have been particularly hard hit. The applications are open until March 31st or until funds are exhausted. Last year, the funds were exhausted well before the deadline. So call your local lender. The way you begin, you do not call the SBA. You have to contact a local, what they call a participating PPP lender, preferably one with which you already do business. One thing we learned from the pandemic last year, banks did play favorites when it came to PPP loan applications. They tended to favor their own customers. If you are asking for a PPP loan from a bank where you do not maintain a commercial deposit account, you're probably going to wait a while to get your application approved. Make sure that you start with a bank that you know, where they know you. You're much more likely to get your application approved faster. A list of participating lenders, if you go to this is a web page on the SBA government website that gives you a list of the participating lenders state by state. Okay, so those of you who got your PPP loans in 2020, whether or not you're going to go for a second draw loan this year, you're probably thinking about forgiveness. In the immortal words of Don Henley of the Eagles, one of his famous songs from the 1980s, I'm really not sure, but I think it's all about forgiveness this year. You know, when do you apply for forgiveness? What are the rules on this? Well, the rules are a little fluid right now. Most accountants and tax advisors are advising their clients to wait to file forgiveness until we have a better sense of what the rules are. The rules are kind of fluid. Some of the forms are being in the process of being changed. You know, a month from now, things are going to look a lot differently than they do today. And a lot of people are asking, accountants, tax advisors are saying, hold off until we get greater clarity on the rules, because it may be easier for you to get forgiveness, 3 months from now than it is today. Now, that's great, except that you do have a tax deadline. You do have to file tax returns this year, so you kind of have to know whether or not you're going to get forgiveness and how much forgiveness you're going to get before you can file your tax returns. A little bit of a catch-22 situation. You may have to request an extension on your tax return. Now, most of us, we do file extensions on our tax returns anyway, but there are a lot of us who have never gone on extension. You may have to consider going on extension until we know exactly what the forgiveness scenario is going to be. One thing that changed in December under the new law, it used to be that you had to elect, you couldn't elect the covered period. You either were 8-week or 24-week, depending on when you got your loan. But the Congress wiped that out now. You can choose, whenever you got your loan in 2020, you can choose either the 8-week or the 24-week period to determine whether or not you complied with the loan's condition. Now, a lot of us are assuming that you're going to get forgiveness and that it's going to be 100% forgiveness. And for a lot of you, that's going to be the case. But you got to be aware that there are some traps for the unwary. Under the original CARES Act that was adopted in March of last year, there are some circumstances in which forgiveness may be limited or denied. You may not get complete forgiveness if you laid off people during 2020. If despite your best efforts, you still had to lay off some people, that could limit your ability to get forgiveness. You reduced employee compensation across the board, and this is a little trick, which I was kind of hoping that they would address in the new December law, but they didn't. If you used any of the loan proceeds to pay compensation to an owner, so somebody who owns the business, your forgiveness is limited to roughly 1/6 of the amount of proceeds that was used for that. So if you and your spouse have a business, or let's say you're a solo consulting practice and you got a PPP loan and you used it to pay yourself, you probably will not be able to get forgiveness for that amount, except for a very small amount. About it's 2.5 divided by 12. Don't ask me how they come up with that. But that's the amount of loan proceeds that you can get forgiveness for. It's not a lot. So be very careful. If you used it to pay off a W-2 employee that was not an owner, that's 100% forgivable. That has not changed. Under PPP2, now here's the other thing. Can you get a double dip? So let's say that you did take out a PPP loan in 2020. Well, the law is very clear that you do not have to include the amount of that loan in income. That's terrific. It's considered tax-exempt income for you. But can you also deduct the expenses that you paid off with the PPP loan proceeds? The IRS last year in two very significant rulings said, no, you can't do that. That's a double dip. You either can do one or the other. If you're going to deduct the expenses, well, then you got to pay the loan back. And if you're not going to pay the loan back, then you can't deduct the expenses. But Congress in the December law did something very different. They basically overruled the IRS and said, no, you can do that, especially if you don't know when you file your tax return what the amount of forgiveness is going to be. The argument was made, and it's very logical. I mean, look, if I don't know how much I'm going to get forgiven, well, I don't want to lose those deductions. I want to take those deductions because I may need that to soak up some of the amount that's not being forgiven. So you can't have it both ways, Congress. You got to tell me one way or the other. Am I going to get forgiven or am I not? So Congress actually, for once, listened to that, and they basically said that they overruled the IRS position, and so you may be able to take a deduction and exclude the loan proceeds from income at the same time. Talk to your accountant or tax advisor about this, though. The IRS was not very happy that Congress did this, and I understand there is some pushback going on at the federal government level about this. So that's a question to ask your accountant, and don't be surprised if he or she, gives you the same sort of mealy-mouthed answer that I did. Well, let's wait and let's see what Congress and the IRS does. One thing, though, the new act, this PPP2 act that was passed in December, provides for a much more simplified forgiveness process for loans of $150,000 or less. Roughly 90% of the loans that were made last year were $150,000 or less. But we're waiting for the SBA to adopt application forms. That's what's holding everything up right now. We don't know how simple that's going to be. But if you borrowed less than $150,000, chances are you're going to have a much more simplified forgiveness application coming fairly shortly. Okay. Taxes. The December law, the new law, did not really give people a lot of tax benefits, except for that one that I just discussed, the possible double dip for being able to deduct expenses that you covered with PPP loan proceeds. But the original CARES Act did make some significant tax changes, especially in the field of net operating losses. It used to be that you could only deduct net operating losses up to 80% of your taxable income. Congress did away with that for NOLs that arose in 2018, 2019, or 2020. So if you had NOLs in those years, you can actually carry them back, which you couldn't do under the 2017 tax law. The 2017 tax law said basically you can't carry them back into prior years, but you can carry them forward indefinitely. Now that's still the same. You can always carry them forward indefinitely, but the new law does allow you to carry them back into prior tax years. Now, of course, to do that, you have to amend your tax return. You have to go back and amend your prior, if you've already filed for 2018, which you probably have, 2019, you may not have. But if you've already filed those returns, you're going to have to go back and reopen them again to take the deduction that may expose you to a greater risk of audit. So the better discretion being the better part of advisor, I think, being the better part of valor, I think most tax advisors are telling their clients now, don't even think about carrying them back, but you can carry them forward indefinitely. So by all means do so. Take advantage of that. Your business can also delay payment of employment taxes during the pandemic period of 2020. You can delay them for basically 50% of them will be due the end of this year, and the balance will be due at the end of 2022. And that applies to self-employment taxes as well. Again, talk to your accountant about this. There's a million details on these things. But the biggest thing that, frankly, one good thing that came out of the pandemic is a lot of small businesses are not going to owe a lot in taxes in 2020 if they were affected by the pandemic. Okay, so let's talk politics here for a second. I don't like to get political in any of these programs, but today is a very important day. We are doing this program on Tuesday, January the 5th. So if anybody on this program is living in the state of Georgia, get out and vote today. Today, you are voting in Georgia. You are voting for not one, but 2 Senate seats. This is very unusual for a state to have both of its Senate seats come up for election at the same time. That is happening in Georgia, and it's going to affect how the Senate is composed. If the Republicans win one or both of these Georgia seats, they are going to have a majority in the Senate, either a 51-49 or a 52-48. If they do have a majority in the Senate, then it's unclear what, if anything, is going to happen in 2021 in terms of tax law changes or anything else. President-elect Joe Biden has made it very clear he wants to raise taxes. Let's face it, somebody has to pay for this PPP program. And we all know who it is going to be. Ultimately, it's going to be the American taxpayer who is going to pay. But how much, who's going to be affected, who's going to get their taxes raised, who's not, that is a real political football that we're going to be seeing playing out in 2021. And how it plays out will depend to a very large extent on how the Senate is composed. So this Georgia election is probably the most important election we have had in a very, very long time. If you are in Georgia, get out and vote. Keep your eye on this. We need to know how the Senate is going to be composed. If the Republicans win one or both seats, the Republicans will have a majority. The House, of course, has a Democratic majority, so it's going to be a tug of war to see if anything is going to happen. If the Democrats win both Georgia seats, though, they now have a 50-50 split in the Senate, which gives Vice President-elect Kamala Harris, as President pro tempore of the Senate, the deciding vote, which means that it's much more likely we will see progressive tax initiatives in 2021. But there's a big caveat to all of this. With a Senate that is so finely composed, that is so evenly balanced between Democrats and Republicans, there's going to be a lot of temptation for senators, individual senators of both parties, to go rogue. Especially if there is a 50-50 split. The temptation is going to be very great for a conservative Democrat or a middle-of-the-road Democrat to say, you know what? I don't really want to go with my party on this. I want to be a hero here. I'm going to side with the Republicans on this, on something. And likewise, there may be a temptation on the part of a liberal Republican or a middle-of-the-road Republican to say, you know what? I don't really like the fact that the Republicans are blocking everything. I'm going to join my Democratic colleagues on this one. The likelihood of having individual senators going rogue increases dramatically when you have a 50-50 or a 51-49 split in the Senate. So it's going to be a very interesting year politically, and I make absolutely no predictions as to what's going to happen there. Okay, so bottom line, what should you be doing in 2021? How the hell do I know? But I think I'm on pretty safe ground, I think, with this. Stay the course. Like I said at the very beginning of this program, if you are listening to this program now, you are a survivor, and you should congratulate yourself for having survived the worst year for American small business since the Great Depression. You're obviously doing something right. Keep it up. Keep doing whatever's working. As you did last year, get the most revenue you can. Do everything short of committing a felony to get money in the door. Keep your costs to an absolute rock bottom. Forget temporarily about profit, operating margin, cash flow, all the stuff that we talk about in our SCORE seminars. Don't worry about that right now, because the government is helping you out now. You probably will not end up paying a lot of taxes in 2020. If you were affected by the pandemic, and market the hell out of your business. Do not cut back on your marketing expenses. I said this back last April when we did our first pandemic, related SCORE program, and I'm repeating that now. Do not cut back on marketing. It is more important than ever that your customers know that you're still around. I've had situations where local small business rumors have started to circulate that thus and such a restaurant has closed down, that thus and such a business is closing their doors, when it's not true. These are clients of mine. I would know if they're going out of business or not. But a lot of false rumors are happening now. You got to get the word out. Hey, we're still here and we're surviving. We're not going to go out of business. If that's the case, you got to let people know, because rumors are going to start circulating. Maybe rumors circulated by your competition. Let's face it, not everybody reacts to a pandemic in nice ways. If you have enemies, they're going to start saying, well, you know what? I think Cliff's business looks a little shaky here. I don't know if he's going to be around for the long term. You got to be the one to fight that and get back. Keep doing what's working. Stay alive until October. And if that's not possible, consider doing a small business reorganization right before the pandemic hit. Incredible timing. Congress amended the bankruptcy code to allow a streamlined reorganization process for small businesses. The timing on this could not have been better. It's called Subchapter 5 of Chapter 11. If you're going to look it up online, talk to an attorney, specifically one who deals with bankruptcy issues, and find out if this is something that your business, it might enable you to stay on life support until 2022. This is a reorganization. This is not a liquidation. You're not going out of business. You're staying alive on life support and keeping your creditors at bay. But a small business bankruptcy might be the only way that you can stay alive until 2022, when we'll have a better sense of what recovery is going to look like. If you can qualify for one of the new loans, or if you can do a second draw PPP loan, by all means, take advantage of it. Go to your local PPP lender today and find out what needs to be done. Okay, keep your eyes on the news. This is very, very important for survival. You cannot afford to stick your head in the sand at this point. 2021 is going to be a transition year. We do not know how fast the transition is going to be. There are a lot of variables here. You really need to keep your eye on the news every day and get the latest information about what is happening. Even a program like this one gets out of date in a real hurry. Watch out, especially for the vaccination rollout in your state. Every state is rolling out. The CDC has issued recommendations as to how the vaccine rollout should go out, but it's up to the individual states to determine exactly what happens and who gets the vaccine and when. That is a state law determination. So you got to find out what's going on in your state. Here in Connecticut, for example, we have a little debate going on right now because the governor wants to limit the vaccine to people who are 75 and older. And a lot of people are saying that's too conservative, that we should be giving the vaccine to all people age 65 and older. So within each state, there are differences of opinion as to how things should happen. Right now, as I said, we're in category 1A. Keep your eye, though, on what we call categories 1B and 1C. 1B is, and I'm quoting the CDC definition right now, not your state's definition, which may be different. People age 75 and older, frontline essential workers, including police officers, firefighters, teachers, grocery store staff, and U.S. Postal Service employees. These are the people in 1B. Then there's 1C, which is basically everyone over the age of 65, people younger than that with high-risk conditions. Who determines that? Probably your physician. The same physician years ago that got you that wonderful prescription that got you out of the military draft back in the 1960s is probably the same if he's still around. This is the same doctor you want to go to get the prescription for the COVID vaccine. If they're still around, of course. But that's you want to keep an eye on when this is happening and how do you get the vaccine? where is the vaccine going to be? Is it going to be some place in the state capitol where you have to go to get it, or is it going to be your local doctor's office? All these issues have not been resolved yet, and they're being resolved on a state-by-state basis. When are you eligible for the vaccine? Where do you have to go? Those are the two biggest questions. Look for school openings and other herd immunity signals that the economy is opening up. So if your state government says we'll allow people up to 20 people to be in a restaurant at any given time, that's what I'm calling a herd immunity signal, where they're letting bigger and bigger groups of people congregate in an enclosed space. Keep your eye on these things because it probably will happen. It'll mostly happen with younger people. I think it's going to be a long time before older people are going to be comfortable going to a restaurant where there's more than 10 or 15 people there. But younger people, especially people who've had the disease, who have immunities, who've been tested positive, who've been tested as negative, these are the people who are probably going to be more comfortable, opening up their social life. That's one of the big unknowns for 2021 is how quickly that's going to happen. Another thing to keep your eye on right now, most states still have a moratorium on lease evictions and commercial mortgage foreclosures. It's not a good time to be a landlord right now. Landlords can evict their tenants, even tenants that owe them several months' rent. However, I'm not aware of any state that has passed a law saying that landlords are required to forgive their rent that is due. If you have a brick and mortar small business with a lease and you have not paid rent since March of last year, you cannot assume that your landlord is going to forgive that rent when they are now, when the government lifts restrictions on them and they're now allowed to evict people, they're allowed to foreclose on mortgages. Right now is a very good time to talk to your landlord and ask them, what are they going to do? Keep in mind, you're not alone. I mean, if you're in a development or if you're with a major commercial landlord, they probably have hundreds of tenants who are in the same boat as you are. And some are hurting worse than others. What are they planning to do as far as lease forgiveness is concerned? Keep in mind, I mean, I'm not saying you should have sympathy for landlords, but they're kind of sandwiched in the middle here because they can't collect rent from their tenants, yet at the same time, their mortgage loans are not being forgiven either. They have to make those payments, and they can't make the payments if the tenants are not paying rent. So they're sort of in a monkey in the middle situation. Those of you who remember that awful game that you used to play in the schoolyard, you never wanted to be the monkey in the middle because you're being torn at from both directions. This is where the landlords are right now. So have a little sympathy for the devil here. Landlords are in a really bad situation right now, and we really don't know how flexible they're going to be or how flexible they can be when the pandemic lifts. Frankly, I mean, if it were my decision, I would say, look, let's just simply do a total redo here. All loan payments, all lease payments from March 2020 to January 2021 are forgiven. And that's it. You cannot collect them legally without going to jail. We're just going to do a do-over. Wherever you were in March of 2020, that's where you are in January 2021. But unfortunately, I'm not an elected official, so I cannot make those kinds of decisions. Those of you, by the way, who are politically active, you may want to start pushing your local elected representatives, your state senators, representatives, and get them on board a forgiveness of mortgage and lease debt program for 2021. That might be a very good thing for you to do politically as a small business lobby. Last but not least, keep your eye on the progress of the mutant strains of COVID-19 because this may affect the vaccination progress. I mean, if anybody starts saying that an existing vaccine is not effective to handle these mutating strains, that's going to set us back a long time. Quite frankly, it's going to take another 6 to 12 months for the vaccine developers to create a vaccine that will be effective against the mutant strains. Right now, they're saying that they are. They're saying that the two most popular vaccines that are out there now are effective against the mutant strains that we know of, but that could change. Keep your eye on it. That could be a real big negative that could make this whole program worthless. Oh, so what's the bottom line? The bottom line is the same as it always is, which is this is one of my most popular things. Some of you know, if you follow my YouTube channel, I have about 50 YouTube videos. This will be one of them shortly. It'll be posted the next couple of days on YouTube. But I've got over 50 videos on YouTube right now, mostly 1 hour, 60 to 90-minute videos on various aspects of running a small business. And one theme that runs through all of them is victory always goes to the ruthless. Now, that's not a nice word. That's an ugly word. It has some very negative connotations, but it doesn't mean what you think it does. Listen, I have a YouTube video called 3 Personality Traits Every Successful Entrepreneur Must Develop. If you search for my name on YouTube, you'll be sure to see the video. It's one of my more popular ones. And I talk about exactly what ruthless means, but make no mistake, in tough economic times, whatever the cause, it's the business people who are not afraid to be utterly ruthless, who are willing to do outrageous, crazy, creative, in-your-face things, everything short of breaking the law to protect their businesses and keep them alive. These are the people who are most likely to survive and come back stronger than ever. It's during tough times that innovations and breakthroughs are likeliest to happen, if only because necessity is the mother of invention. Some of you listening on this call could probably tell me stories about things you have done that you thought were utterly crazy back in March, things you never would have considered doing, but you did them and they worked for you. And now they're becoming part of your business model now. Because the pandemic did you a favor by showing you some ways to make money that you didn't know about pre-pandemic. I'm sure there's some of my listeners on this program have had that experience, and I hope you will share that with us. Find out what works and keep doing it, even if it's stuff that makes you shake your head saying, my God, I never thought in a million years I would be doing X. Don't let that get in your way. There is no normal anymore. Okay, so summary. We're not likely to face more shutdowns this year in 2021, but we've got a long way to go. We are not out of the woods yet. We have another 2021 is going to be a transition year with a gradual resumption of what I call group activity, people congregating in groups in the second half of the year. How fast it's going to happen, what's going to happen, when, I haven't a clue. Any more than anybody else does. You got to keep your eye on the news and stay on top of what's going on this year, especially. Keep the revenue flowing, even if cash flow is negative. Don't worry about cash flow. I mean, let's face it, you're in the middle of a pandemic. There are ways that you and your accountant can deal with it. Keep the revenue flowing. Revenue is the key to success in any small business. Without revenue, we all know what the profit margin is: 0. Okay. Get your fixed costs as low as possible, but don't script on your marketing and promotion. It's more important than ever for you to get out there and say, hey, I'm there. I'm going to survive. I'm going to be one of the winners. Don't worry. You can still place your orders with us. We still have inventory. We still have stuff. Whatever it is you're doing, make sure that message gets out. It's more important than ever because, as I said, there are a lot of people who are taking advantage of this pandemic to knock their competition and saying, well, I think Cliff's business, his restaurant, he's not going to make it. I understand he's way down. They're making this up. They have no idea. But if you're not countering it, if you're not out there saying, well, wait a minute, no, there's just the rumors. What's the famous Mark Twain quote? The rumors of my death are greatly exaggerated. That's the message you got to get across to people. Consider applying for a PPP loan. Why not? You have nothing whatsoever to lose unless you do not have employees. If you do not have W-2 employees, you can still get a PPP loan, but keep in mind that your ability to get that loan forgiven is going to be drastically limited. Congress does not want these loans going into the pockets of the business owners. They want to see the loan proceeds being used to keep people employed, keep them off the welfare and the unemployment rolls. That's what the purpose. These are job preservation laws at the end of the day. Keep your eye on the news. Be prepared to adjust quickly to changes, and keep in mind, if you don't like my ruthlessness thing, I understand. Ruthless is has a word that has some very negative connotations in our society, in our language, but they're not true, but some people still won't listen to it. So if you don't like this, a former U.S. Marine Corps colonel told me this when I was in college. They appointed him. He was an alum of my college, and they appointed him to head up the career office. And I remember him telling me something, which I've never forgot. He used to say that we had a saying in the Marines: if you want something badly enough, you will get it badly enough. So with that, that's all I have to say. on 2021, at least for now. Maybe later in the year, I'll have some things to say. Here is my classic guide to surviving any sort of negative stuff the business world throws at you. For those of you who want to get in touch with me, here is my contact information. And Bob, if we have a couple of minutes, why don't we throw the floor open to questions? I did see some stuff coming in the chat room.
Yeah, we do have time for one or two maybe questions if we're quick. So if you have a question, please put it in the chat box, and Cliff will answer it when it comes in. But maybe while we're doing that, you could just scroll to the appendix slide so people, when they look at the recording, will be able to see those.
Yeah, if you go down past the last scroll slide, you'll see that I've got 3 or 4 of these. This goes into a lot more detail on the new PPP loan program for 2021. Keep in mind, it expires on March 31 of this year, or when the funds run out, whichever is sooner. So you don't have a lot of time here. You need to get yourself into the office of a qualified participating PPP lender. And again, if you go to the SBA.gov website and you type in participating PPP lender, I have to say that without, I'm spitting all over my screen right now. Participating PPP lender, you will get to the page in the SBA site that tells you that lists them all state by state.
Unfortunately, we are out of time and don't have any questions. So as a reminder to people, the session was recorded and the materials are available within the next couple of days on our website. And our next webinar will be on Thursday. And the topic is I'm a Technology Expert, Ask Me Anything, with Matt Krieger presenting. And again, if you would like to take advantage of our free counseling, you can click on the yellow link that you see on the screen, or you can go to our website and click on the Request a Mentor link. And if I could ask you to please fill out your evaluations, we'd appreciate it. So on behalf of SCORE, everyone, thank you for attending our live webinar today. And a special thank you to Cliff for presenting. And stay well and healthy, everyone, and have a great day.